So today we're moving on to the next I am statement of Jesus. We've been in a series of the 7 I am statements of Jesus from the book of John. I won't bore you with how we got there from the book of Matthew, but just suffice it to say we have. And we've spent the last couple of months, maybe even a little bit longer, studying the I am statement of Jesus concerning I am the light of the world. So we've looked at the I am statement, I am the bread of life. We looked at the statement, I am the light of the world. And today we move on to the I am statement found in John chapter 10, which is that I am the door, or I am the gate. These I am statements of Jesus point to the unique identity and fundamental characteristics of who Jesus is. Today, as I mentioned, we will talk about the I am the door. The statement is closely linked to the I am statement, I am the good shepherd, which we will discuss again as the next I am statement. But today I want to focus on this I am statement that Jesus makes, I am the door. And that's found in John chapter 10, beginning in verse 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and leads them out. When he puts forth all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. And a stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, but they did not understand what those things were which he had been saying to them. Jesus therefore said to them again, Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep do not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I came that they might have life, and might have it more abundantly. Twice you see Jesus makes this declarative statement, I am the door. Jesus is not a door, according to this passage, but he is the door. So Jesus is not just a door, he says, but the door. And so the first question that I think that arises out of this passage is, how are we to understand this statement of Jesus about being the door as it relates particularly to the entrance into the kingdom of heaven? This metaphor of the door is alluded to in a couple of other places. In Revelation 3, verse 20, we see the picture of Jesus standing at the door and knocking. Verse 20, Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and will dine with him and he with me. Notice that Jesus is both the door and is also standing at the door, something that I think has some interest and that perhaps we'll touch on a little bit as well. Here he's standing at the door, knocking, waiting for an invitation to enter. And in Matthew 7, verse 7, we see another use of this door, the metaphor, in this passage which we've touched on before, as we've talked about prayer. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it shall be opened. This passage forms the setting for another doorway metaphor found a little bit later in the book of in the chapter of Matthew chapter 7, in verse 13. This is now not called a door, but called a gate, and the passage reads, Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter by it. But the gate is small, and the way is narrow that leads to life, and few there are those who find it. This is a perplexing statement, particularly given the passage that we find in Revelation chapter 7. So I'm asking you to clarify all these passages. In Revelation 7, verse 9, we see a different picture. Here it talks about few are able to get through the narrow gate. But in 7, it says, and after these things, this is John in vision seeing the heavens opened. Behold, a great multitude was there, which no one could number, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. So here we see, in contrast, the narrow gate, which has few that can go through it. And then we see the new heaven and the new earth, which has before it a multitude that no one could number. And not just a large multitude, but a diverse multitude as well, from every tribe and kindred and tongue and nation, indicating the ubiquity or the extreme diversity of the people who are there. This is, of course, I think, something of critical importance, given, again, the fact that Jesus calls himself the door. So now we have some of these things to kind of sort out. The narrow gate, the narrow way, sounds like something which is exclusionary, but the multitude which no man could number sounds highly inclusive. Who is on this broad way, and who is on the narrow way? In the door passage from John 10, which we first read, we see that the door is the legitimate way to the fold. It is the narrow way, it is the straight gate. The size of this passageway is often seen as a road to denial or self-denial, sometimes even called the way of the cross. In Matthew 16, Jesus talks about this in verse 24. Verse 24, that Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what will a man be profited if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? This statement, come after me, we see there's the same language that we just read in John chapter 10, where he talks about the sheep, that he's going before the sheep and that they are coming after him, and he calls them by their name and he leads them out. Throughout the ages, the church fathers have viewed the narrow way as the way of self-denial, of sort of this aestheticism way, the way of self-deprivation. We've spoken before of such people as Simon Stylites, who sat for 37 years on a pillar outside the city of Aleppo. The platform was about 1 meter squared, and he never came down from the platform for 37 years. These vows of denial have been frequently seen and been extreme throughout the ages. Vows of silence, the wearing of oppressive garments such as hair shirts that continually cause an irritation. Vows of chastity, even the extreme aesthetic exercise of Origen, the church father who castrated himself in an attempt to be in a self-denying way. This kind of thing has been often seen as the narrow way And the context, however, of this passage in Matthew chapter 7 suggests that while noble and pious, the narrow way and the narrow door of self-denial is precisely the opposite of what has been interpreted as self-denial and as self-deprecation. Jesus begins this passage in Matthew 7 with the admonition not to judge. In 7 verse 1, do not judge lest you be judged, for in the way that you judge you will be judged, and by your standard of measure it will be measured unto you. Here we see that the narrow way is the way of grace. To deny myself or to deny oneself is to deny that I can make myself holy by my own activity. The call to suspend judgment is the call to a type of community. It's to extend the grace given to us to others. And that, the way of grace, is neither easy or intuitive, is why it is seen as the narrow way. So easily it is for us to fall into the trap of those described in Matthew 7, 21 and 23, 21 to 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and did we not cast out demons in your name, and perform many wonderful miracles? And then he will declare to them, I never knew you, depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. The need to be in the business of God, of doing stuff for God, as the road to the kingdom, as the narrow way, is both intuitive and is compelling, and is something that mankind easily gravitates toward and falls toward. But the judgment is that I never knew you, and this shows that this is not the narrow way of self-denial. What is to be denied, it seems, is in the self-effort toward righteousness. On our own, the narrow way seems to be outlined in Matthew 25, verse 31 to 46. And then you recall the judgment scene here. And in the judgment scene, the key verses are this, that the king will answer and say to them, truly, to the extent you did this unto the least of these, my brother, what did you do? You fed the hungry, and you took care of the thirsty, and you took in the stranger, and you clothed the naked, and you visited the sick, and so forth and so on. Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these, my brothers, you did it unto me. And verse 45, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to the least of these, my brothers, you did not do it unto me. Jesus says that when we minister to the needs of others, we minister in verity to him. In the judgment, it seems that this is how Jesus gets to know us. Unlike those that he doesn't know, despite their frenetic activity of working on his behalf, Jesus recognizes those who he has met before. I think I know you, he says, because I've met you before in the person of the hungry, in the person of the naked and of the stranger. Yes, I think I know you. I think we have met before. Is it possible that Jesus is the door, as the door, is to be understood in this context, that even though we may not see him, we may not understand him, or we may not even know about him, that we enter into the kingdom of heaven through this door because we are established as a community of faith by finding Jesus in the person of our brother in need. This denial of self that we've been referring to is the denial of actually selfishness. It is the passing on of grace which has been received. And that the door does not imply a knowledge of Jesus, but it implies an understanding of the methods and the ministry and the message of Jesus. These are found in the mission statement of Jesus, which he proclaimed in Luke chapter 4, verse 18. Luke 4, verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the release of the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, and to set free those who are downtrodden, and to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, you see, by and when I see and minister to the needs of others. So I'm interested in your thoughts today on this concept of Jesus as the door, the narrow way, the straight gate, the way of grace, the way of self-denial, and how does this relate to the ministry and the message of Jesus?